Right, we're getting folks in, Mark.
Awesome.
Hey, Teresa.
Welcome, everyone.
Oh, they're really coming in now.
Oh, good. It must be you.
Alan, Ira, Kelly, Magda, Tanya. So for those of you that see my Friday show with Rob Crispin, he gives me a really hard time about greeting everybody as they come in, but I think it's so fun to see so many new faces or so many new names and so many friends that join us. So I have to say hi to everybody. It's just friendly.
Yeah, that's awesome.
But we got Alan and Ashlyn, Bridget. So exciting. Kevin, Lindsay. All right. Thanks, guys, for joining us. We're going to kick things off. For those of you that have been a part of SparkLab in the past, you'll know this is not anything new, but I want to make sure everybody has a good sense of what we talk about here and what this is all about and why it's so important. And so just to kind of give everybody a good sense of what we're going to talk about and how you can participate. We want this to be something that's really interactive. So if you have questions for Mark or myself, please put them in the chat. We'd love to hear from you. We also want to make sure that if you have future topics that you want us to talk about here, that we can tackle some of those and make sure that we bring in really good speakers that can help us make sure that we touch on all the angles to whatever topic it is that you want to discuss. But really, this discussion is all about innovation in the industry. And we think about innovation oftentimes with technology. But it's not just technology, really. It's all about leadership. And leadership really looking around the corner with where they feel like the market is going, and then designing intentionally something that's differentiating for their company to tackle what they feel like is coming. So it's a little bit of like future prediction, a little bit of trying to get ahead of the curve of what could be coming in the market and answering that either consumer demand or opportunity need. And so we're going to look at innovation in a whole bunch of different ways. There's a lot of discussion right now on artificial intelligence. And so we are going to spend a couple of our sessions really this year talking about artificial intelligence. And so I thought we'd start off today with some conversations that Mark is going to help with. For those of you that have not met Mark, actually, for those of you that have not met me, I'm Melissa Langdale. I'm the president and COO of the Mortgage Collaborative. We're super thrilled that you are here with us today. And I am joined with Mark Cunningham, who is the CEO and co-founder of Train. Mark, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
Of
Pleasure.
course. I'm super excited about our conversation. There are lots of discussions right now around artificial intelligence in the industry, and really excited to get your perspective on things. But before we dig into it too much, I think it would be helpful for everybody to know what Trained does. Can you tell us a little bit about your company?
Absolutely. So I didn't find the original product, but after I had sold and brought in private equity into my last company, which was Sales Boomerang Mortgage Coach, now known as Trust Engine, still operating. I was looking for going. I still love building lender solutions, and so I was looking for a solution that could really impact and drive down the cost of a mortgage, both first and foremost for you guys, for lenders, but also ultimately benefiting the consumers. And the cost of a loan has been recorded as $13,000 per closed loan. When you think of all of the paperwork and minutia and everything that we process, and with the latest version of AI, Amazon will tell you that AI has been out for 20 years, and that's machine learning. There's a difference, in the last couple of years as far as the capabilities of what large language models and AI can do. And so finding the right opportunity to help really make an impact and a solution to drive costs down for lenders is what Train does. And so we've captured the trademark for AI mortgage manufacturing. And of course, there's a lot of great manufacturing tech out there. So we're looking to basically, implement large language models that you can initially and immediately take, ROI to your operations in, and make it so that you don't have to spend all of the dev and the R&D and the expensive people that it costs to put that kind of stuff in. So,
Yeah.
and then finding practical solutions, and practical means it needs to make sense from a affordability perspective to harness it. Lenders need that solution to drive down the cost of a loan, and then also it needs to drive an ROI. It's okay to brag and say you've got AI, but then what does it actually do for me? And that's
Right.
what I wanted to find and help evolve, in this industry.
Yeah, it's one thing to have kind of a flashy object, but hopefully that
Yeah,
flashy object actually helps you to be more profitable or gain extra revenue, right? And so, or hopefully
that's what it's
both.
all about.
Yep. And we're going to get into large language models, but I think it would be healthy just to make sure we level set. You started talking about machine learning and the differences between machine learning and artificial intelligence, really what we know today. Can you break down, like in simplistic terms, if we were like to talk to our 10-year-old child about the difference between automation and artificial intelligence, like how would
Hmm.
you explain that to them?
Okay, so automation traditionally, or what we've seen so far in a lot of the tech that exists today, is pre-programmed, rules-based, code. I talk to my kid, my 10-year-old, like an adult, so forgive me if I don't say it
Oh,
like
okay.
I'm
All right.
talking to a child.
That's all
And he,
right.
nego-
I can translate for you if we need to, but that makes
yeah,
a ton of sense.
and he negotiates better than me, by the way. My kids do. So.
I love it.
But anyways, the real difference, I'll just try to say it in simplistic terms. It took engineers and a lot of human effort to continuously keep rules-based code up to date and functioning. And we're in an industry where overlays change all the time. The assembly line changes all the time. The market goes like this, right? And so you have to adapt. And then the regulations change too. And so when that happens, you have to pay engineers to change those rules. And then that implements to the code and then your workflows and so on. So the difference is that with the latest version of AI and LLMs, the possibility is that they can adapt to themselves, and as you train, hence the name trained, um, as you train the LLMs and apply them to different data sets, right? You can get them to do certain functions for us. Maybe they're terrible at some things, and there are many more applications to discover over the next decade actually.
Yep.
um, and that will create new jobs. Some
Yep.
jobs will go away, but that'll create new jobs and new opportunities. And it'll also automate a lot of minutia types of things that we all have to do. So that's really the difference in the latest tech. So
The way that I like to think about it, for those of you that might need a different view of it, but the way that I think about it is one is creating a funnel, right? You're creating a very specific track. In cases of automation or machine learning, you're creating, if this one thing happens, then you can do this. And it's a very specific track that, like Mark was saying, it doesn't let you have that flexibility as a guideline changes, or maybe your business model changes and you want to go from just offering retail origination to now being able to have multi-channels, maybe correspondent or wholesale, or you want to offer different products like conventional to FHA to VA to USDA. If you create these very specific funnels, now you've got to create like a whole different track for this new product or a whole different track for this new kind of sales cycle. And so, it's to me, the difference in automation is kind of building one track that things move on, or building a foundation that whatever is sitting on that foundation has the ability to find the information on its own and learn as you build the foundation that's firmer. Is that fair?
it is absolutely, and
Okay.
one of the benefits of that that's speeding things up is the large language models. I'll keep referring to LLM because that's
Uh,
really the nitty gritty of what the new AI is based on. And
Yeah.
so that's like your chat GPT and all that kind of stuff. There's
Yeah.
more than one LLM out there.
Yeah.
But it's the rate at which it can process and learn is speeding up like every month. And it was apparent to me when I started looking at Train, as I was friends with Jonathan, the original founder. It would take longer to actually train the system to do things, and now that time it's taking is much faster to train something, and it's amazing what some of these LLMs already know, and out there that's in the data. So you're able to harness that and really fast forward very quickly in what you're trying to accomplish.
I want to talk about the speed of evolution for AI, right? So as we continue to build out these large language models, and I mean, they're specifically called large for a reason. These are data sets that have to be huge to cover all sorts of areas of our industry. And they need multiple ways to think through something. Otherwise, if you just upload a guideline set, for example,
Mm,
and you say, hey, I don't know, we'll call our AI Andrea. Hey,
mm,
Andrea, go find the guideline for how to calculate income. Well, it could pull the guideline for how to calculate income for a conventional loan, but that might be different in your specific scenario to how it would consider things for FHA or USDA or VA, for example,
mm,
right? So
mm,
it needs context. And so building out those large language models with a really big data set and then connecting all of that data intentionally is really, really important to making sure that these platforms give good information. But the more that they learn, the faster that they learn, the more they can take in, the more they can create solutions that are really, really more valuable for the industry. But that speed is speeding up every day.
Yes.
So, that speed of evolution, it kind of affects lenders two different ways, right? You've got some that are super excited about it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is amazing. Like, if I think about in the 22 years that I've been in the business and the 25 before that my parents were in the business, we went from an industry of taking pieces of paper that people pushed across the desk to us, and then we took a picture of the piece of paper and we put it up on our screen, and we're like, hey, we're digital, right? We didn't need necessarily the paper, but we still needed the paper. We just looked at the pictures of the paper. And now we're starting to transition into how do we leverage data for our industry. And so we're as we started to transition to that kind of point, the speed at which we can evolve so many things in our industry, I think is really, really fun. So we're at this point where folks are super excited about what's possible. I'm curious to hear your input, knowing that you're building this, right? You're seeing that speed of evolution on a regular basis, and you're probably having to think about how you evolve your technology on a regular basis as a result. So, where we are today with, simplistic things like leveraging Chat GPT
Mhm,
or leveraging maybe even some tools for even a little bit of graphic design
mhm,
for a company. So like very practical kind of use cases for AI that are relatively like simplistic in nature. They don't require like needing security around non-public information or things like that. The things that a lender could pick up today and try to take advantage of. But as you start to think about like the future of automation and the future of kind of workflow design and mortgage, how do you see AI being like critical to that? Like what do you see that evolution, I don't know, that journey of evolution looking like?
Yeah. So I think initially, we're evolving as many companies are. There's 43,000 companies I think I last read trying to evolve on ChatGPT. So I'm not the only one, but you
Yeah.
know, we're all trying to evolve. But that being said, it still does take multiple technologies and layers, if you will. Like you want to set up these layers because if you take an LLM out of the box, it's gonna be wrong, sometimes even 90% of the time to start. Maybe it's 50%. We found that some specific LLMs, different ones. So like Google has Gemini, there's ChatGPT. Elon Musk is trying to convert X into his own LLM. But some of them are better at different things than the other. So there's no one fits all solution. Also, certain technologies are still valid. Like, for example, machine learning still works better over certain things than it does on other things. And so
Mhm.
combining technologies. Another thing is human in the loop. It still requires human in the loop to train and test things. And the internet already has, and we'll talk about this later, but the data bias in it. And so it's important when you condition, if you're going to start testing and working with it, that you condition over a really widespread data set, right? So that you can take in all kinds of scenarios and then you end up with a very neutral bias instead of one way or the other. And so that's kind of how we develop today. But I think it's good to compare, in history, like the internet came out like I think in the 90s, and before that there was an intranet with the military and different things. We had bulletin board services when I was a kid, which before internet.
Yep.
and just like you, I've been in the industry for a while, but it took, from the 90s to like the early 2000s, it took a period of time to figure out just how to apply it and for it to evolve. And we're in the same thing. I actually believe that this is the second, iteration of the digital revolution. We had the industrial revolution at the early 1900s. That's where machines and automating with machines happened, right? Instead of human labor of, it became a tractor instead of somebody, raking a garden or something. But you fast forward, same thing. It'll take a few more years to actually discover what it can evolve to in the applications, and then that'll speed up. And the difference here, though, is that I believe this is going to move a lot faster. And like for example, there's probably a lot of anybody that's in tech here may use Copilot, from Microsoft. It'll go out and find a lot of the application for what we're discovering, and so that's speeding up that process, very quickly. And I think it's just really important to. So if I had to say, how do you harness that? Like if you look at lenders, they're in business to obviously close loans, and not everybody has a huge budget to hire this tech team. So I think the best thing you can do is try to just really define what it is you're trying to solve for. And then you have a champion that owns that outcome of what you're trying to solve for. And then you're looking for those technologies with AI to get it evolved to where you want it to be. Because there is a lot of discovery, and that's expensive right now, I will say, but that'll get cheaper over time.
We did get a question in the Q&A, and so we'll start off with that, but I think we could probably pull in some practical use cases for folks too. But the question is a little bit of a statement in question, but it says eNotes is a great example. The fact that it's not everywhere and more widespread is amazing. And that's real, that eNotes is a way for us to differentiate a customer experience. It's also a completely different way of us to store closing documentation. And so that's a piece of kind of that digital evolution that you started to talk about earlier. It made me think of, have you ever seen the movie, oh gosh, what's the movie? Oh my gosh, I had it, it was top of mind. It was where these ladies are, they basically are calculators, and they work for NASA, and it's the most phenomenal movie. I'm gonna have to look at it now.
Tell me
Yes,
about it. I
Hidden
gotta see it.
Figures. Thank you, Bridget.
What is it? Hidden
Hidden
Figures?
Figures.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I knew somebody would know here. So it is this phenomenal movie about these ladies that, well, it's really about NASA, but it's this journey of these four women that work at NASA, and they get pulled into different things when NASA was very unfriendly. Women didn't have the ability. I won't say they were unfriendly, but women didn't have the ability of kind of growing their careers in the same way that men did at the time. It's
Right.
old movie. But there was this group of women that they brought in like the first calculator, and it was this giant IBM machine that they couldn't actually fit through the door. It was so big. They ended up figuring out a way to get it through the door, get it into the building, and get it into this room. And then literally nobody knew how to use it. And these ladies knew that it was coming, and they had trained themselves. So it was this one lady had trained herself, and then she trained her whole team on it, and they just raised their hand and they were like, we're ready.
Oh, wow. I gotta
So
watch that.
I
That
think,
sounds amazing. That's
yeah,
awesome.
it really is a very, very cool movie. If y'all have not seen it, I would highly recommend it. But it makes me think of, you mentioned that there's going to be some new opportunities for folks. There's going to be some jobs today that our industry has that may not be the same job in the future. And we hear it over and over again that those folks that really, the folks that leverage AI or leverage technology in and of itself to kind of be their highest and best use are the folks that are really going to continue to grow and excel. And so it's programs like this that make me super excited, because I want to be able to make sure that our industry is prepared and that we can really evolve together, and make sure that we're all kind of moving forward and lowering that cost of origination, as you mentioned, for so many lenders.
Yes.
We started to talk a little bit about, I want to get into use cases, so I don't want to veer off too much from that. But we started to talk about kind of the excitement that lenders have around the speed of evolution. There also are some questions, though, that a lot of lenders have. And so I think we'd be at a loss if we didn't kind of talk about both angles. So the questions that I hear all the time are, okay, well, what really are my risks? How am I going to be regulated with this? I just, until I know those things, I don't want to heavily invest in this area. So I want to I want to give everybody a little bit of an update on some things that we've heard. We've had some discussions with CFPB around this very specific topic. And as y'all know, they came out with a statement on this particular round appraisal. They were looking at it from an appraisal bias perspective. But we asked kind of a bigger, broader question of how are you looking at artificial intelligence and really how do lenders need to prepare their companies? And the feedback that we got from them was, hey, you're going to be held accountable to the standards that we hold you accountable to today, whether that is a person doing the work or whether it is automated. And so I think that's really important for us to understand as an industry is that oftentimes there's questions of, gosh, this large language model that Mark's talking about earlier, it might create this kind of hallucination, this unintended bias, so to speak. It might deny a borrower that shouldn't have been denied. Well, of course that might happen in the beginning, but that also happens with people. And so just like we have to train our people and our teams, we have to make sure that our systems are trained the right way too. And we have to have systems and processes in place to check them on a regular basis. So those of you that are in that boat that are waiting to kind of see how is this going to be regulated? What are we really going to be held accountable? I think it's really important for you guys to have a good sense of that. But I want to talk a little bit about, I started to chat about hallucinations a little bit. Mark, I know you being knee deep in building AI yourself and leveraging those large language models as you're working with lenders on a regular basis. How do you help them to make sure that the solutions that you're providing are minimizing that kind of risk of bias that can naturally happen as you're building these things out?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a great question. So you definitely need multiple layers. You can't just go ChatGPT application because you're going to have a higher rate, and there are hallucinations. They happen almost in every scenario. And we haven't even gotten it down to where there's 100% no hallucination. So you need multiple layers and audit layers to catch that, and however you're implementing that. And I think that that's important to realize. So there's the audit component piece of it. It's also, what are you solving for? What can the approach we've taken is, what is the low hanging fruit that isn't going to cause a buyback, right?
That's
That
right.
is causing so much minutia. If you could free that up, lenders are already down to their core best staff now because of, what we've been through. But those are the leaders of the companies. And if they could be put and tasked towards the growth of the company and kind of maybe get rid of 20 to 30% of the minutia and all the repetitive stuff that Jane, Jim, and Jack have to all look at. Why do they all have to look at that? Why can't it just be looked at once and then it's got one set of eyes instead of three set of eyes? So it's that kind of approach concept. And then the way we approach it is that if you've got a checklist of items, let's get practical. Let's say a loan takes, this many hours to process, and you've got a list of 200 items. If AI could knock out, say, 75% of those items, but you got the most critical that human still looks at in your decision making, anything that's a buyback risk, anything that's that, keep that for now. As
Yeah.
we evolve and get rid of the low hanging fruit, the minutia, that frees you up to focus on that. And then the result is that you can do more loans. You can increase your throughput of funding velocity. You can shorten your days on warehouse cycle. You can then take that all the way down the loan life cycle, which goes into title appraisal, secondary servicing, capital markets, GSE, and all the way. And then those costs need to get passed back, in our belief, to the originator because they pay the most. So that 13,000, they bear most of that. I think if you break that up, 11,000 is the originator, and then the other $2,000 is the other companies.
It's
So
not 11,000, but it is a large portion of
that's a
the
lot. Yeah.
cost of origination. We do all know that for sure.
Yeah.
It's but there are layers to the cost of origination that outside of the actual, a sales compensation. And that can be everything from,
Right.
buying a lead in some cases if you're consumer direct and including kind of your sales compensation in
You can
there to.
apply at both ends. You're right. Exactly. I
Yep,
was talking mostly about the manufacturing side, but absolutely.
yep, yep, for sure. Um,
Yeah. So, having layers to address that. If you think about like why does bias exist, and I think organically, unfortunately, in the first place in data is that people make decisions. We are wired to make decisions based on survival. And
mm,
so if a paycheck is survival or funding is survival,
yeah,
there might be quick decisions made, not even intentionally, based on however people think in their mind, right? And so data has captured that.
yeah,
And I think AI actually gives the opportunity to level set, put the data set back in, make sure it's broad enough so that it is inclusive of all opportunities and everything, right? And you
yeah,
you can retrain over that total inclusion, and then you create this, at least there's always going to be some bias, but you can actually reduce the bias and all that. And then when you look at like appraisal, as long as your mission isn't to fraud appraisals and fraud customers, then you're not going to train the AI that way. You're going to train it against what the regulatory is supposed to do. And an even better thing is that as regulations and things get documented out there, well, guess what? The LLMs will pick that up faster than we can even like interpret that
yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
And it'll start including that. And then we get a chance to audit that. And it's like, oh, yeah, that is correct. That just came out.
yeah.
So it actually presents an opportunity to move faster in adoption of the things that are going to change continuously into the industry.
Okay, I have another question, and it's not on our list. Are you okay if I go off of our list a little bit?
Yeah, I always go off the top of my head. So
Okay, good, 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 good. So, I used to, when I was leading a mortgage company, I used to do actually annual like leadership retreats.
Mm,
And we would go through, and I had this exercise where I asked everybody to find the duct tape. And it was really the pieces in our process that we had said, "Oh my gosh, I got this audit finding," or, "Oh my gosh, I got this, like, repurchase request, and I really need to, like, tighten up this one part of the process." And so,
yes.
we put this duct tape on it, right? We'd find this
Mm,
solution that solved that one little piece of the process, and, we always wanted to make sure that we didn't have duct tape on top of duct tape on top of duct tape, right? And that
yes.
we really had a process that was seamless across all of our customer experience, but also all of our team's experience going through the process. And so I think a lot of times our industry gets caught in that mix of, because we have so many feedback loops, right? We're required to audit so many of our files. And then our investors, if you sell to an aggregator, or the agencies, we're also going through audits, and so we're having to, and regulators are having to respond and react to all of those feedback loops on a regular basis. And it's easy for us to find little changes that we can make, and we put little parts of duct tape over our process.
Mm.
So as you think about AI, like, how does it solve for that? How does it find the duct tape? How do you eliminate maybe needing duct tape at all?
That is awesome. I love your analogy, Melissa. That's fantastic. And you're hitting a great topic. So thank you for that. So a lot of, I talked to a couple of our clients about this, and think about how many second check processes were
Yeah,
implemented into your workflow because you had this really bad thing that happened. And you're still paying for that probably in touches, reviews, people, and maybe even tech stack costs.
yeah,
And maybe the chances of that actually happening are so low, but it was so bad at the time it happened, you're just paying for it forever now because it's in your workflow. So that's a piece of duct tape that would stack on each other.
yeah,
And the reality is how do you really know where your bottlenecks or where that, still applies, or maybe the regulations have changed, it can be
yeah,
applied differently. You got to start with the data, and you got to get that out of your current workflow and assembly line to understand where the bottlenecks are. And I try to give something similar, Melissa, like duct tape. Um, the C-suite within the company, they see the biggest problems and they put out major fires. And
mhm,
to them, that might be the biggest delays in their company, they think, but they haven't really seen the data stacked up against itself, so
yeah,
against the actual assembly line. How long does it take in this segment all the way across the board? And if you
yeah,
could get that data level, which you have access to your logs, you could. It's hard to get out of your system, but when you look at that in a big picture, you can say, hey, we've got really these bottlenecks here. Maybe we don't need that second check here. Maybe it could actually get caught at the end of this process before it funds, or maybe it could do here. And I think it's worth always looking at that as you evolve your assembly line and your tech stack. And so that's where AI can look at that and start to give you what would be more efficient. They're using it in science and disease research now. We can put out, hypothesis on a cure. And it used to take humans all this testing physically to test which one could work, and you had to kind of guesstimate which one might be a good approach. Now you can simulate that approach, right? And then out of that, get the top 10% simulations and just try those instead of all 100. Same thing on a loan file. It's the same kind of approach. And so as we start to shift our thinking towards that, as we see more application for AI, that's really a big opportunity around the duct tape analogy. So
I love that. Okay, I want to talk to you more about this. We might have to schedule another Spark Lab because we are all up at time today.
oh, that went
Thank
fast.
you
You made
guys
it
so
so
much
easy.
for joining us. Mark, thank you so much for joining me today. Before everybody leaves, though, if this has been valuable, this is something super new, and we are on a mission to make sure that the industry knows about all of the innovation that's happening and feels super confident and comfortable in navigating that for their companies. So share it with your friends. We'd love to have them join us as well. And we'll see you again here next month. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers all planned out for the rest of the year. So can't wait to share that with you guys too. Mark, we'll get you set up and we'll continue our conversation around the duct tape.
Awesome. Thank you, everyone. I really
All right.
appreciate it. Thank you, Melissa. This was an honor. Really appreciate it. Great job.
Thank you so much, Mark. You too. Have a good one, everybody.